Hey, this is John Fernay, the co-host of the Maryland Crabs, and I am here today with a Maryland Crabcake for your listening pleasure. What's a crabcake? It's not quite a full episode, it's just a little snippet. Stay tuned and check it out. And make sure you check us out on themarylandcrabs.com. You can follow us on Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast, or find us on Facebook at the Maryland Crabs Podcast. And don't forget, subscribe, rate us, iTunes. Go there now.
3 candidates for Ward 1 Alderman. At your far left, you have a Democratic challenger, Ms. Ellie Tierney. In the center, you have your incumbent, Democrat, current Ward 1 Alderman, Joe Budge. And to your right, you have the Republican challenger, candidate Larry Clausen. Since we have our 2-minute opening statements, we will start with Ms. Tierney, and you may commence.
Oh, great. Thank you, Joe. There you are. I can see you now. Thank you all for coming out. This means a lot to the community that you're all taking an interest. And let me begin by answering the question why I chose to run for Alderman of Ward 1. I chose to run because I'm both concerned and optimistic about the opportunity that Annapolis presents to us right now. We are at a critical point where we can decide what kind of downtown we want. Do we want a downtown that's just for tourists? Or do we want a downtown where we can balance the needs of both? As I've lived here, I've seen the movement to tourism. Also, there are issues such as nuisance flooding, empty storefronts, stormwater management, an inclusive community, aging population, and a safe and walkable community that we should be talking about now. Actually, we should have been talking about them for the last 4 years. We need to address these as they affect each and every one of you in your daily lives. My engineering training and my career experience in construction management has given me a pragmatic approach to address these problems. It has instilled in me a sense of urgency, but abiding by code and specifications to do the right thing. We can have a vision, all of us can have our own vision of Annapolis, but we need to bring our talents together to find out what best works for all of us. This requires community engagement, not only at the planning stage, but throughout the legislative process. I am the person to do that. I want to be your leader. As Ward 1 President, I reached out to leaders and residents and realized what an untapped resource we have, and that's all of you. I want all of you to vote for me, and I will work for you. Thank you.
Alderman Joe Budge.
Many thanks to the Inner-West Street Business Association for organizing tonight's debate, and thanks to all of you for turning out and joining us tonight. In 4 years on the council, I've demonstrated real leadership with real results. I've formed alliances on the council to redevelop both the old Fawcett building and the old rec center, and to rebuild the public works complex on Spa Road. Together, we defined clear rules for special events, vendors, food trucks, and the forest conservation, and we adopted the city's Equal Protection Act. In the last 3 years, I led the council in reducing waste collection fees 31%. When no one would act, I introduced legislation to find a new tenant for the Market House. Throughout, I've shepherded updates to residential parking districts, obtained parking passes for Bloomsbury Square, reestablished the free parking circulator, and represented Ward 1's multiple interests to the parking contractor. My record shows that I listen to you and I'm willing to do the hard work required to get the results you need from your city government. We live and work here because Annapolis is a great city. That doesn't mean we're without challenges, though. Our retail districts are under assault from the online world, and they're hampered by a zoning code that's close to incomprehensible. Parking continues to be a major concern. Status quo is not an option there. Nor is status quo an option for the flooding at City Dock and along the shorelines of our city. Our low-income communities need recreation and after-school education programs, and we need to begin funding $60 million worth of unfunded outstanding pension and benefit obligations. During my professional career, I focused on business. Now it's my time to give back to the community. My ability to do so through public service has been gratifying beyond my expectations. Every day I get to make Annapolis better for all of us. So I'm asking for your support in the fall elections to continue representing Ward 1 on the Annapolis City Council. Thank you.
Republican candidate Larry Clausen.
My thanks also to the Interwest Street Association for their arranging this, and also for the Metropolitan for your hospitality tonight. Thank you all for being here. When my wife and I moved here, retired here a little over 4 years ago, down in the historic district, we were struck by, we'd come here from Northern Virginia, where I had lived all my life to that time, inside the Beltway. We moved here and found a real community. And almost immediately it seemed clear that we had an opportunity to serve all over the place. The old joke about retired people saying, I don't know when I had time to work. I found myself, and my wife found herself, heavily involved with the historic preservation institutions here, Historic Annapolis, the Historic London Town, where we did fundraising and volunteer work and supported in every way we could. And I also am a trustee and a member of the executive committee of the Hammond Harwood House. Became a member of the New Providence Club, a men's club in town, where I was been the treasurer. We got involved in our church. Most importantly, we found ourselves giving historic walking tours with Watermark all over town. Hundreds, and if not thousands, of visitors of all kinds, from fourth graders through elderly, showing them this historic city and the Naval Academy. I think the most important opportunity to serve that I've had, though, has been over the last 3.5 years or so. I've been a member of the board of directors of the Ward 1 Residents Association, where you all know that Ward 1 is ground zero for anything the city council decides it wants to do. And so over the years, I have found myself increasingly frustrated at the time and the energy that we have spent trying to bring issues to fruition, trying to communicate with the city council, and to be heard. And I feel this is the calling that I have. We have real problems to solve here in the city, and I'd like to see them solved in my next term of 4 years on the city council. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with the question portion of the evening with our predetermined panel questions. Ms. Tierney will be given the opportunity to answer the first question first, Mr. Budge the second question first, Mr. Clausen the third question first, and so on. So we'll start with our first question. Ms. Tierney, as Ward 1 Alderman, what will be your top 3 funding priorities for the next 4 years?
Thank you for that question. Can you hear me? No. What happened?
Try it again, sorry.
Okay, time starts. Okay. The first 3 in order of priority, the first one would be funding for the flood mitigation, nuisance flooding, stormwater management plan. I say that, though, assuming that we can look at alternative sources of funds. I know that our Department of Public Works is actively pursuing funding from FEMA, etc. Probably not the best time to ask for funding from FEMA, but anyways, there are some alternative sources for that. The second funding source would be the Hillman Garage replacement. that is been kicked down the can for a long time, and I would hope that there's some creative means of funding that. It's 40 years old, and unfortunately it needs to be replaced. These are all sort of equal priority. The third funding is I'd like to really take a good look at what Chief Scott Baker needs. We need to give him everything he needs. I know that in this last budget we gave him 10 policemen staggered in their hiring, but in the environment, national environment that we live in with heroin, it affects us here in Annapolis and distracts the police force from neighborhoods that would feel a lot more comfortable if there was a police presence. So those are my 3 funding challenges. Thank you.
Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you. I think we've heard a lot and talked a lot about the 2 Annapolises and the disparity between our low economic citizens and our better off ones. I think the first priority has got to be addressing that disparity. We need to put recreational programs back into their communities. We took them out years ago for budget purposes, and we need to bring that back. We also need to put in programs for after-school education for exactly the same reasons. The schools control our education during the school day, but after school is when our kids need help that the city can provide. And so I think those 2 combined are a critical element that we need to start building into our budgets. Secondly, I agree with Ms. Tierney on the nuisance flooding, flood control. That's something that we need to do. It's a necessary first step on our future efforts against sea level rise. And then finally, I think we need to make a serious start on getting control over our unfunded pension and benefit liabilities. There's been a lot of talk recently about the city's debt. The unfunded liabilities are not debt. They're just bills that you owe. The debt has the advantage of having a payment plan. We don't have any payment plan on this $60 million worth of unfunded liability. And we need to develop one before it gets out of control and becomes the elephant that ate the city council.
I'm not sure that the priorities that I see for the city are necessarily a matter of funding or government spending, but having a clear vision of what we want the city to look like. And I haven't seen that in the city council or by our aldermen over the last 4 years. I see trying to fix this problem or that problem. Lord knows we've done enough studies, and I have a bookshelf with some if you'd like to borrow them. But in terms of going towards a vision, this city right now is in a stranglehold of parking and transportation problems. It affects everything, including the disposition of the people that live here. The businesses who are not just at war with the residents or in tension with the residents, but also with each other. And this has got to stop. How many years have we said that parking is the problem and it has to be solved? It keeps us from good commerce. It keeps us from developing new businesses downtown, and it divides the community. And from a visitor standpoint, we have parking lots instead of vistas of the bay. And we hired 2 years ago SP Plus to solve all of our parking problems. Does everybody feel like all of our parking problems have been solved? No, of course not. And one thing I intend to do is to see that the city follows through and solves the problem of creating the pedestrian environment that everybody wants, and I think it will improve the entire disposition of the city, as well as the economy. Related issues are the development along Main Street and Maryland Avenue as good examples. The infrastructure, the plans that the mayor has for repaving in the first part of the year next year, repaving Main Street with sprinkler system tie-ups and so forth, public safety and so forth. And these other issues will come up as we go along this evening. Thank you.
Our second question will begin with Alderman Joe Budge. How would you revise the city budget in order to manage city services, specifically employee benefits and pension plans? Do we raise taxes to make it happen? Do we cut services? Do we outsource services?
I think that we need to look at some combination of all of the above. The taxes, as we go along through time, we've seen that as we keep the tax rate constant, with property values appreciating, the taxes that the city raises also increase, and we've put that to good use on pensions and other benefits for our employees, as well as being able to increase some city services. We need, as we go through our labor negotiations, to involve the unions in addressing the unfunded pension liability. It's their pension, and typically in a pension program, the employee contributes some, the employer contributes some, and that's the way we're structured now. We just need to ramp up the size of the contributions. And then finally, as we have been successful with outsourcing in some cases. Our trash collection has led to some great economies. About half of our road paving and about half of our snow removal in a snowy year are also done through outsourcing. We can look for specific opportunities to make savings in those arenas. But I want to go on record early and often that I am not a fan of outsourcing the rec center.
Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
First of all, I would say that raising taxes is a non-starter. I'm absolutely opposed to raising taxes. I'm in favor of outsourcing where we can, and I'm certainly in favor of renegotiating labor contracts, and if necessary, revising the staff structure so that we are working smarter rather than with more people. I don't think that we have too few people working for the city government. I think we can raise the level of the economy in the city, not by taxation, but perhaps by serving a couple of purposes at the same time. One is raising revenue, and the other is improving economic development downtown, for example, along Main Street. You'll probably think that the restaurants and bars and the profitable businesses that are downtown, that the city must be prospering from that. But in truth, the city gets nothing except a license fee. In the case of late night bars, it's actually a net cost to the government, to the city, because of the late night, the people that come in after hours and cause vandalism and possible bodily injury. And the whole rate structure for real estate along Main Street is skewed because of that. So what we can do is get our business partners in town to pay their fair share. They're making a lot of money. We do not collect sales tax. We collect a license fee. We collect property taxes. So just to be clear, we all want to have vital businesses in town, but they need to pay their fair share, and that could be a solution in terms of the, you might say, the carrot and stick approach to get the businesses to do the right thing in terms of vacant and abandoned properties and excessive rents.
Democratic challenger, Ellie Tierney.
Thank you. I understand that city budgets are a lot different than construction budgets. I just want to mention that in my last year with Turner Construction, I worked on a $900 million community hospital. I was pre-construction manager. It was $900 million. We have approximately $100 million budget. My first approach is to put this budget in a format that we all understand so that we can identify what Alderman Budge referred to as some fixed costs, such as the union benefits. Costs that we cannot negotiate. I will be committed to getting our fiscal health in order as we have postponed critical capital projects like infrastructure needs to address sea level rise and replacing the Hillman Garage, as I spoke about. And our debt continues to increase without a plan, a recovery plan for debt reduction. We cannot spend without having a source, and if we don't, we need to either reduce costs or look for revenue sources. We also can look at alternative funding sources, as I do not believe the city has to take on the entire burden of Annapolis flood mitigation. We can look at our tax structure. I see we have the mayor here, so I hope he's listening. We can look at our tax structure shared with the county and see who benefits more, and is that fair? We have not demonstrated fiscal responsibility in the past by leaving $1 million on the table for the rec center purchase, or not using that year to reevaluate the golf course to see if there was some type of revenue opportunity there. I'll skip my last sentence.
The next question will begin with Republican challenger Larry Clausen. Which Ward 1 neighborhoods have issues you consider of utmost importance? And how will you address and solve those issues within the next 4 years? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
That's a good one. We have a bunch of neighborhoods in Ward 1, and we should have a meeting together sometime where we actually all meet each other. We have Silpana, we have Murray Hill, we have the Arts District, we have, well, of course we have downtown, don't we, the Historic District. There is a feeling that particularly the Arts District out here, which is just a delightful area, there's been a narrative developed over the last year in particular, last year or so, that there is a division between us out here and us down in the Historic District. And if there's one thing I intend to do is to demand that we get together, because this is a false narrative. We all love the same things about Annapolis. The issues that divide us, for example, relating to the Historic Preservation Code, that enables the Historic Preservation Commission, the idea that somehow the arts community is entirely motivated differently from, my gosh, I'm in the executive committee of a museum that has one of the most famous collections of historic decorative arts in the country, the Hammond Harwood House. How can we be divided over such issues as art? That's a false narrative, and I personally have a tremendous sense of identity, not just from my business experience, but my own art experience, which began in 3rd grade when I started studying the violin. The few years before we moved here, I was actually running a music school, 250 students, and 25 professional musicians from downtown Washington. I know a great deal about art and the business of artists. I studied art one summer at the Corcoran Gallery. We can come together, and I intend to be that bridge. And I have the accessibility as an individual that you all who know me know that I am accessible to talk about these things. I look forward to making that happen.
Democratic challenger, Ellie Tierney.
Could you repeat the question? Because it...
Which Ward 1 neighborhood have issues you consider of utmost importance? And how will you address and solve those issues within the next 4 years?
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought it was. Well, let me tell you a story. When I was Ward 1, I'm not sure if I was president at the time, but it was several years ago, and I ride my bike to Crawls, and I pedal past Bloomsbury Square, and I got to start chatting with some of the residents there, because it's a very community neighborhood, sitting out on front porches and that kind of thing. And I built a relationship with some individuals, and I realized that some people in Ward 1 really didn't know that Bloomsbury Square was part of our community. And for a livable city, every resident has to have some civic pride. They have to feel like the city is helping them and they get their fair share of services. Otherwise, they feel disengaged, the kids feel unwelcomed, and the rest you can guess. So I have a thought here that is more inclusiveness and building relationships versus bringing services to them. You have to do both. We have to assure them that we will give them state, transportation that is not in really the city's hands, but make sure that they have a means to get to the rec center, or we help them with their community center. Now, the city doesn't necessarily have to do this. I strongly believe that every ward should take care of their city housing that way. I am so proud of our Ward 1 members for embracing Bloomsbury Square. Thank you.
Alderman Joe Budge.
We have so many communities in Ward 1. I hate to single out one of them, or even just a few, but time sort of requires that. One of the things that is great about Ward 1 is that we do have so many communities that have their own character. I think one of the most high-profile issues in the community is out in Truxton Heights, where we have problems with basic flood control. When we have a strong rain, there are rivers running down the streets, rivers running into people's living rooms. We need to work with Public Works to create the projects to do some basic stormwater runoff control there. This isn't like improving existing controls. It's like there's nothing there because this community was put together long before the engineering and stormwater controls had anything like today's sophistication, and they need help. Secondly, in the Murray Hill area, one of the biggest concerns that people have is the quality of the water in Spa Creek. We need to continue working. The council recently adopted a watershed improvement plan. We need to start working to implement that to improve the waters, both in Spa Creek and obviously as well as in the rest of the city waters, so that we can enjoy all of our water sports, so that we can enjoy our street and parks and our other access to the water. And then finally, in the historic district. I think the number one problem that I hear about the most is parking, parking, and parking.
The fourth question will begin again with Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. The preservationists and artistic components of our community appear at odds on what should be allowed in our historic district. What skills and/or experience do you have that makes you think you can develop a shared vision for our historic district that will be acceptable to all elements of our community and beneficial to Ward 1 and the city? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well, specific to art and I guess the mural issue, full disclosure, I have a mural on my bed and breakfast, and that is very emblematic of what art does to the community. It has created a very lively block, with apologies to Senator Astor, who lives across the street when everybody takes their picture there. But it's a perfect example of incorporating art in a historic district. I believe art identifies a sense of time, where we are, and there's some good examples of that. I believe that it was about a year ago when HPC rolled out new legislation. Unfortunately, it was very hasty. The timing was very interesting, and the rollout was very sloppy, and it created elevated emotions, and it was totally unnecessary process. I hope that when we have the opportunity to do that again, which we should update our HPC regulations, we will have a town hall forum, which I would have every intention of doing. Our last one involving HPC was very productive. Unfortunately, the workshop was stopped and again created bad feelings. There was a speaker that I can't recollect the name, and Lisa Craig was it was great to have this speaker come and talk to us about incorporating the arts district in the historic district. And I'd like to get that speaker again and address the economic vitality that can be created by the synergy between the arts district and the historic district.
Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you. I think it was unfortunate that our dialogue between the arts community and the preservation community was essentially put on hold as we waited for the lawsuit over the mural to play itself out. I agree with Mr. Clausen that the communities are not that far apart. We both care about the same things. We both see value in preservation as well as in the arts down in the historic district, and we need to come back to the table, as Ms. Tierney mentioned, and start discussing how we bring this back together again. I think we can find a number of forums to start doing that now that it looks like we're about to have this lawsuit out of the way, and we're not going to be hamstrung. We can have town hall meetings, we can have meetings with the HPC and with the Art and Public Places Commission, as well as the council can push committee meetings if we need to bring everyone together.
Are you yielding the rest of your time, sir?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, I alluded a few minutes ago to my own past. I began my adult career in intelligence work, both in the Navy, the Naval Security Group, including some time out at NSA, as well as the CIA's clandestine service. I went into private business for 25, 30 years, did mostly government contracting on distributed systems. But all along, ever since third grade, I began to study the violin. I studied music all the way through my first year of graduate school. I've played every kind of show, worked with set designers, have directed orchestras. I know about the business of music. I spent almost 9 years running a music school, which was an outreach program at a large church in Northern Virginia. It was a serendipitous opportunity for me. I was in semi-retirement doing consulting. What a tremendous joy it was. So I know artists of all kinds. We taught ballet, we taught modern dance, we taught drawing and so forth. And these were all professional instructors that we had. So I have a unique personal experience in all phases of art that gives me a great deal of affinity. I love the Arts District and the people that are here. And it pains me to see the way things were mismanaged a year ago in trying to address the issues of the HPC enabling legislation. Because I know quite a bit about historic preservation as well. And unfortunately, understanding the arts and understanding historic preservation, the public has not been well educated about this. The groups have not been brought together. And this is not difficult to do. This is not brain surgery. It requires somebody who talks to people, who goes out into the community, can be easily reached, can be trusted when he says what his views are. You know he means what he says. I'll have to stop.
Our next question number 5, will begin with Alderman Joe Budge. How do you envision City Doc's future? Should the city renew the current lease to the Sailing Hall of Fame project, support the Blonder Hotel, some other option? Tell us your visions for the future of Annapolis City Dock. Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you. As many of you know, I spent a fair amount of time working on the City Dock Master Plan, and I still believe that many elements of that plan are worth exploring in additional detail. We need to get the cars off of City Dock and return it to pedestrian use. The City Dock Master Plan included a number of planning studies as requirements. We've implemented some of those. We need to continue that effort so that we can figure out the traffic and pedestrian flows that are necessary, as well as we still don't have a handle on the parking side of it. Mr. Blonder's proposal for a hotel out there is an interesting one. He would like to, for those who haven't heard, he would like to put a hotel there. And since the hotel needs parking, he wants a 2-level parking structure under what's now Dock Street. That's a $60 million proposition that might flood a lot, you think? I'm not sure that's a brilliant solution. But I think, the idea of repurposing the unsuccessful restaurants out there into hotel space or other kind of space that will bring people in, I think is a good one. We need to continue our efforts with studying solutions to long-term sea level rise and flooding. The specific answer that was in the City Dock Master Plan is probably not the right one. But that's why we've been working since then on the Weather It Together program to start putting alliances together that can develop those plans.
Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
I find it hard to relate to the term vision in terms of what's gone on or not gone on during the last 4 or 5 years. We have the City Dock Master Plan, which is not yet actually a part of the law of the city. And it's true, it's been picked apart and used when useful, or changed when it was necessary or thought to be necessary. We still have the Pentagon parking lot out there, interfering with the view of the bay, notwithstanding the fact that everybody is still at odds with each other over parking. So we can study this and study the minutiae and the detail. Maybe we could do another parking study. I have a copy of the last one on my bookshelf at home. There's also the Ward 1 sector study. These are all interesting. Actually, I have them in Adobe if you'd like to look at them. They're very interesting. Any one of these plans might have been implemented. But it takes some courage, and it takes going out into the community and connecting with people day after day and saying, is this what you really want? What are your thoughts about it? How about having town hall meetings regularly so that people can express their views and you can explain to them what the actual issues are, what the truth is. So we're where we were 4 or 5 years ago, and we have a parking lot. I'm not aware that Mr. Blonder has presented a proposal. Ward 1 Residents Association agreed to hear from their architect a sort of a concept, but it was mostly questions about what the residents would like to see. That's unusual, asking the residents what they'd like to see, by the way. In terms of vision, my vision is we get the cars out of there and we make everybody happy, because we will turn everybody into a pedestrian and they can quickly move from one place to another, and we can stop fighting over the gridlock. Thank you.
Democratic challenger, Ellie Tierney.
Could you repeat the question again? I lost track from the first
How
one.
do you envision City Doc's future? Should the city renew the current lease to the Sailing Hall of Fame project, support the Blonder Hotel, some other option? Tell us your vision for the future of Annapolis City Dock.
Okay, yeah, I knew there were a lot of questions there. The Sailing Hall of Fame, I think what we have to remember is that there is a historic Waterman building there that is not addressed in the Harvey Blonder Hotel proposal. And in regard to the Harvey Blonder Hotel proposal, I met with Planning and Zoning. They don't even know anything about it. We were courteous as a Ward 1 board to meet with them. I think the one idea that was floated around was actually incorporating the Sailing Hall of Fame in the hotel. Not sure in my construction experience how you put a house in that hotel, but there's, let's just put that aside for now. I trust that this is the last year that the Sailing Hall of Fame will have an opportunity to develop a plan. It just doesn't seem, again, we met with them when I was Ward 1 president, just doesn't seem like they have the marketing push to get that done. And that's unfortunate in a way. I mean, the Sailing Hall of Fame is a pretty cool concept and a focal point of Annapolis. But let me bring up the City Dock Master Plan. The City Dock Master Plan is approved legislation. It went through a lot of turmoil, and it was basically disregarded or discarded because of the loss of surface parking, which Mr. Clausen refers to as the Pentagon parking lot. There are acceptable elements in the City Dock Master Plan that we need to work off of. We should not disregard it just because we lose surface parking in the plan. When we did the bulkhead replacement project at City Dock, I know you all remember that, there were a lot of spaces that were gone, and it worked. So, was that the bell?
That was the bell.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'll finish.
The sixth question will begin with Republican challenger Larry Clausen. What have you done, or what will you do, to galvanize and or consult the community prior to forming your decisions affecting your Ward 1 constituents? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
Well, thank you for that question. That is a wonderful question. If you don't know me, I'm sorry that we haven't met personally, but I know a great many people here. Ever since we moved in, the movers almost couldn't move our furniture in because people were stopping in front of our house to say hello and welcome us to the community. It's been that way as long as we've lived here. To not know people in this town, you have to lock yourself up in a room somewhere. This is a friendly town. And as I reviewed the activities that my wife and I have been involved in, we are always involved, all over on the street and so forth. And we spend a great deal of time, I have spent a great deal of time in connection with the Ward 1 Resident Association, because we are always caught by surprise about what's going to happen next. We read about it in the newspaper. It's horrifying, and it's taken a lot of time, and it's made a lot of residents angry because they don't understand what's going on. My slogan in my literature is it's about trust. And by that I mean you can trust me, and those of you that know me know that that's true. My mother told me that to be a good liar, you have to have a good memory, so I got rid of that at an early age because that was not going to work. You know what I think, you know why I think what I think, and I stand to be corrected. My idea of a debate is to arrive at the truth, not to win an argument. So I have as far as I'm concerned, extremely well connected in the community, and would intend to grow that connection if time permits. I mean, there are only so many hours in a day, but I am always there, and I'm always talking to people. And if you don't think that's true, ask my wife. She says I talk too much.
Democratic challenger, Ellie Tierney. What have you done, or what will you do to galvanize the community prior to forming your decisions? Galvanize or consult the community prior to forming your decisions affecting your Ward 1 constituents. Democratic challenger, Ellie Tierney.
Thank you for this question, because I think that's going to be my most effective talent in hopefully being your next alderman. When I was president of the Ward 1 Residents Association, I brought in many people to have conversations I believe we wouldn't have had before. And I discovered that there was a gap that needed to be filled of informing the residents of impending legislation and issues that affected them, as there did not appear to be a mechanism to do that. Conversely, we would hear of legislation and then hear why it was, good for us. So there was this void. Some examples, I don't know if some of you remember, was I took the lead in getting a town hall together in response to the rollout of the enormously important piece of legislation on historic preservation. Because the residents' consensus was that they were surprised and that it was, just something that they had no idea was coming their way. That is not going to happen on my watch. I think, based on my experience, it's in my DNA to have a collaborative approach. A lot of this has to do from my past career. From conception, you deal with the community. You deal, in my case, it would be in the owner and the architect. You have a collaborative process. You have a charrette. You design things. You work together all the way through. And that approach is what I'm going to do in the legislative process. I want to involve the community. What I found walking Ward 1 is that that's really necessary. Thanks. Cut off.
Alderman Joe Budge, what have you done, or what will you do to galvanize and or consult the community prior to forming your decisions affecting your Ward 1 constituents? Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you. As Mr. Clausen mentioned, we have a very friendly and open community. It's hard not to know an awful lot of you, and I am talking with and discussing issues with constituents all the time on a daily basis. On some of the larger scale issues, We've been very successful bringing stakeholders together in multiple meetings to iron out what needs to be in legislation. The special events legislation was an example of that, where we brought business interests, community interests, and government interests together to figure out how to make that work. And we spent about 2.5 years on that. We're going to need to do a similar effort in the near future with parking. As you know, the parking consultant is about to release their study on their recommendations for parking. We need to bring people together to understand those recommendations and figure out how they apply to Annapolis, how we can change them, how we can mold them to fit here in our town rather than some generic big city, to make a solution that will improve life for all of us and for our businesses.
Thank you, Alderman Budge. Are you yielding the remainder of your time?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. We will now move on to the audience question portion of the evening. We've selected our first 2 questions at random, and we will continue to select questions at random while there is time. The debate format will remain the same, with each candidate having an opportunity to answer questions first. Since we're starting a new round of questioning, this first question... This next question will start with Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. Ms. Tierney, what is your position on new development in the city downtown, given that there are so many for-rent buildings? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well, they're really...
Did that happen again?
No, that was my fault.
Okay, here we go. I don't know if there is a correlation between new developments such as 110 Compromise Street and the empty storefronts that we see on Main Street. I think those are two different activities, or lack of a better word. So let me talk first about development in Ward 1. I think that in the last 4 years we've taken sort of the easiest path in what will drive revenue, and that was with the decision on the rec center versus allowing University of Maryland to have their university here of environmental science. 110 Compromise Street, I don't think of that as a success. I may eat my words if there's some wonderful restaurant eventually, but we talk about all these studies, and I passionately believe that a lot of study, sweat and equity on the maritime study, the comprehensive plan, the Ward 1 sector study was pushed aside to allow 2 wonderful men to develop this building into whatever it will be, to change the maritime zoning. That stuff you just don't do, without really thinking about the effect down the road. Eastport will be next when potentially tweak the maritime zoning. That stuff's pretty sacred, at least I believe so. Development in Ward 1 is along Spa Road is creating a lot of erosion that when you meet with the residents on Silipana after a rainy day, their backyards are mud. One resident even put in some gravel so that they wouldn't get that runoff from the developments that are coming across Spa Road. I guess I probably took too long.
It's all right.
All right.
Alderman Joe Budge, what is your position on new development in the city downtown, given that there are so many for-rent buildings? Alderman Joe Budge.
I think the issue of vacant and for-rent buildings downtown is symptomatic of a bigger problem that we need to address. The when you talk to potential businesses, when you talk to other folks outside of Annapolis, we have a reputation as an impossible city in which to do business. We need to tackle that head on, and I think the first place we need to start with is our zoning code. Our zoning code, most of you are familiar with telephone books. The entire city code fits in 2 books that are about the size of telephone books. One book is our zoning code. The entire rest of the city code is in that other book. The zoning code is so convoluted and crazily interwoven, it's almost impossible to understand if you don't have a secret decoder ring. And we need to make our code understandable to people who want to come here and want to do business and want to figure out how they can get along. We can't continue to throw obstacles like this in people's faces and expect them to come down here and do business or open shops or anything else. So that's kind of one of my main thrusts over the next 4 years. And then secondly, I think development downtown, we are mostly built out. There are very few opportunities for further development within the ward. And as long as we do them in a context that whatever does come along is within a context that respects our community character, I think it's probably a good idea, but these things tend to be sort of bubbled up by private investors or developers.
Republican candidate Larry Clausen, what is your position on new development in the city downtown, given that there are so many for-rent buildings? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
That's an excellent question. First of all, I would like to disagree with another speaker that actually it used to be that the process of getting permitting and so forth was a nightmare. And I knew vendors myself who could not deal with the city and wouldn't even try. That all came to a dramatic change a couple of years ago when the mayor reorganized the city. It was an important change, and I wrote a guest column in the paper about it, applauding the government for doing this. And it'll be on my website as soon as I finish getting my website up, which I'm told will be another day or two, but please look for it there. But let me tell you what the real problem here is on Main Street. Let me tell you a story and follow it because I only have about 1.5 minutes. The rents, much of the property is owned by a couple of landlords who control a great deal of the property. They raised the rents to a very high rate because they got permission a couple years ago, several years ago, to keep their bars open until 2 in the morning. Actually, it's later than that. After which time, and people come in from out of town to drink, and they make a lot of money on drinking. So they can pay exaggerated rates. So that skews the rates of rents all up and down Main Street. Okay, so why don't they lower the rent so that they can rent that other property that's vacant? Because keeping the rents high allows them to leverage that property to buy other real estate elsewhere. Do you follow me? Has anybody ever told you this before? Okay, this is what's going on. Now, we can do a couple things. We can talk nicely with these landlords, and try to persuade them to do the right thing for the community. And I think in many respects, they think that they are doing the right thing. Or we can put pressure on them and make it to their financial advantage and to our tax advantage to do the right thing, one way or another. And I intend to do that. I intend to lead the City Council to do that.
Our next question, we will begin with Alderman Joe Budge. What mistakes were made with respect to the market house proposals and request for proposal process in the last round? Alderman Joe Budge.
I wonder why you're asking me first. Market House RFP process continues to be a learning experience. Unfortunately, we weren't able to start on it as soon as we might have liked. Which compressed the time frame because of our election cycle. And in retrospect, it would have been beneficial to include in the RFP requirements a more quantitative table of criteria for evaluating the proposals. That being said, we have several proposals on the table in front of us. I am restricted by the city attorney and the purchasing officer from commenting on those proposals in public, other than in the council setting, because I am part of the selection committee, as it were. However, I sincerely hope that we will be able to make a decision in the near future rather than kicking this can down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Joe Budge. Next, we'll move to Republican challenger Larry Clausen. What mistakes were made with respect to the Market House proposals and request for proposal process? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
And I have 2 minutes. I have 2 minutes to explain that.
You have 2 minutes to explain that. Yes.
Only 2.
The first problem is that this RFP was put out in the middle of an election year. There was no time for anybody to look at it. I'm talking about residents. Now, the bids that wound up coming in, I know that many of you here may emotionally yourselves favor one of the bidders, who is the group is the owner of this restaurant. And I consider them friends myself, but this is not what it's about. The RFP was flawed in so many ways. It's unbelievable. It needs to be postponed until next year and start over again. The RFP was for a market house. It was the opposite of a restaurant. And it was to serve locals, mostly takeaway, a true market house. Now, the 2 bids that have survived this process are bids to put in restaurants with bars. Now, you have to understand that the city is subsidizing the rent. So, whereas the market house, the bidder might be paying $15, let's say, a square foot. Right across the parking lot, one of the bidders is charging $65 a foot to Chipotle. So we would be subsidizing a restaurant and bar in the middle of a dozen other restaurants and bars. And what sense does that make? Obviously, a lot of people are very upset about this. Also upset that it's not going to be a market house. Also upset that the language in the RFP is so sloppily done that the opportunity to extend the lease may mean that the lease will pass, title will pass to the lessee, and we will lose control of it altogether. That's just a starter.
Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. What mistakes were made with respect to the Market House proposals and request for proposal process? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Okay, I know Alderman Budge spoke previously about developers getting dismayed about working in Annapolis. Well, this Market House RFP process, as well as the Rec Center RFP process, for those of you with RFP is request for proposal, were both emblematic of what not to do in issuing a request for proposal. I know everybody can play Monday morning quarterback here, but when I heard that this was going to come out in an election year and Alderman Budge had talked to his constituents apparently and knew what we all wanted and issued this 90-page RFP in the 11th hour when we knew for 4 years that this market house was a failing proposition. It was very unfortunate. I knew that we were setting ourselves up for failure. Also, as an aside, this is Annapolis, Maryland. It's the capital of Maryland. And when I was Ward 1 president, we had an idea. We knew Market House was failing. We knew the track record. We were going to call in major developers from Baltimore and bring them in and talk about how we can make this work. I don't think we should sell ourselves short and just not go out to, give it time, write a good RFP, and bring, have some more input. This is not anything with the two local propositions against them. It's just that I just think we should elevate our reputation a little bit more. As far as the process, it's flawed because you don't have a date that you're going to decide, and then you, at that date, tell the bidders that you're not going to decide. In my world, that's called an amendment. They had 2 working sessions to discuss. Oh, the bell's ringing. It was flawed, and it's very unfortunate, and hopefully it won't get into legal action. Thank you.
Under the rules of the debate, because Alderman Budge was mentioned by name in Ms. Kearney's response, I must offer him a 30-second opportunity for rebuttal unless he chooses to yield his time. Alderman Joe Budge.
I would simply like to say that contrary to one of the speakers, there are 3 bids still on the table, and I think all 3 bids are potentially viable. And we owe it to the bidders to make a decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Budge. We will begin our 3rd audience question with Republican challenger Larry Clausen. How do you stand as to increasing sprinkler requirements? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
Thank you. I'm entirely in favor of it. There are about 250 sprinklers, I think, active along Main Street. I'm not sure what the actual number is, but there are a whole bunch of sprinklers that have not been attached. And the plan is next year, ending before the boat shows start, that we will be repaving Main Street and putting sprinkler taps all along both sides of Main Street for the benefit of the businesses there. So first of all, this is an important safety issue. Second of all, it solves the problem of these landlords doing the right thing and making upper levels of their properties available for useful rent if they choose to do the right thing. And I expect that the City Council will make them want to do the right thing. So I think the sprinklers are an excellent idea. They're long overdue and are a question of public safety, first of all, and also economic development. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Republican challenger Larry Clausen. Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. How do you stand as to increasing sprinkler requirements? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well, full disclosure, I'm on the Sprinkler Initiative Committee, which was a result of the Yacht Club fire. There seems to be a pattern when there is a horrific fire that people get together and say we should do something about this. I'm very subjective about this. I feel that if you are in the historic district, it is our livelihood. If we lose our historic district, we really don't have anything other than the academy that is a given, if you will. And there happens to be a problem. It is and I learned this yesterday actually at the meeting, is that the burden of the sprinkler distribution is on the business, not so much the building owner. The building owners on Main Street, which can be absentee owners, can basically just have not do anything for the tenant, and then they put it in the lease that the tenant has to do the sprinkler distribution. So that's that's difficult to overcome. But here's the deal, here's the facts, that we only have about 35% of our historic structures downtown protected. And we are opening up Main Street, and we are running out the stub outs to the curb line. So the bulk cost of the sprinkler renovation will be bringing it from the curb, and then putting in the standpipe if they don't have it, and taking it up to the second floor. What you have to think about here is, what is our objective? And my vision is to have the second floors of our buildings downtown to be occupied. To do that, we will need sprinkler systems. And let me just tell you about a model building, I believe, downtown. It's the Cocapelli building. That is a storefront with an occupiable apartment upstairs, fully sprinkled. And the owner of that building realized the long-term revenue he was going to make by that initial cost of putting in that sprinkler line. That is the role model all of the building owners should have downtown.
Incumbent Alderman Joe Budge.
Yeah, I join my colleagues in being enthusiastically in support of additional sprinklering in the historic district. I was here and watched the Star of India fire. We've been here for the Zachary's fire, the Cocapelli fire. We had a fire on Maryland Avenue in the smoke shop right behind my house. We have a very good understanding of how vulnerable we are and the impact on our historic district if we burn it down. The city needs to work on a carrot and stick approach. We need to, for a carrot, we need tax incentives. We need low interest loans to allow property owners and businesses to not only install the sprinklers, but they have to shut down some of their business for a time while they do that. We need to take those things into account. We also need a legislative approach to make businesses do that. We put legislation in place after the 98 Star of India fire that essentially made sprinklering voluntary unless you did half of your building in changing. And we had low interest loans, and by themselves, it didn't accomplish anything. Look at what happened with the yacht club. They were eligible for those kinds of incentives when they rebuilt their facility, and they chose not to do anything about sprinkling their building. So it's time to get on with it, both with carrots and sticks.
Thank you, Alderman Budge. The next question will begin. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not yet the next question. Yes, the next question again, we will begin with Democratic challenger. I'm sorry, I've lost my place here. 1, 2, 3. Yes, this does begin Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney, because this is the fourth audience question. The change to privatizing residential parking has not worked out so well. What are your thoughts regarding residential and so-called city lots that have been subcontracted out? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well, I guess the answer to that is if you support entrepreneurs. I applaud him, but I think the irony is that we put a lot of money invested in this private company, SP Plus. It's a $10 million contract over 10 years. So I don't believe, in spite of our angst with this company, that we have any recourse with them as far as terminating their contract. I believe they're evaluated every year, and there's a performance matrix, which I think you all can guess is based on the revenue that they make. As Alderman Budge said, they're coming out with a final study. I bet most of you didn't know that. They're going to come out with a study that's going to tell us their recommendations. And I understand that we will have the opportunity to make comments, etc. I assume that their study will be based on kind of forced revenue, if you will. This this is disturbing because, speaking of RFPs, the intent of the RFP in awarding this contract was to optimize the use of underutilized garages. Those underutilized garages being Gott's and Knighton and perhaps even the State Garage, but they won't even look at the State Garage because that's free on weekends. So our hands are tied. I believe that residents in the Conservation District, if you don't know what the Conservation District is, it's the C1 district downtown. It really is an at-risk district. The lots are small, etc. I've talked to real estate agents, and property values will go down if they can't tell prospective buyers of single-family homes that they will have a residential pass, not only have a residential pass, but be able to park within a reasonable distance. So I would want to support residential parking after 5 p.m. in the C1 district. So we'll see what the study brings, but this is too much of an issue to address in 2 minutes. It's a big deal.
Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you. I agree it's a big deal. But there are a couple of aspects of it. First, the city lots that have been contracted out. The parking contractor has been operating at full tilt for just a little over a year. They have done, I think, a reasonable job, not necessarily an outstanding one, but they've done a reasonable job of implementing our parking system as it is defined in our city code right now. Our city code sets the policies, and they're clear. They have made an imperfect system work as well as it can. Looking forward, we need to fix the parking system, which means we need to fix our parking policies and practices so that it can work better for all of us. The private lots that have been contracted out, I think, are a different question. Again, we have entrepreneurs that are trying to provide parking. I have no problems with entrepreneurs trying to do that. I think that we need to look at what kind of structure that needs to be done under, because there are certainly problems with the way it's implemented and enforced that we need to take a careful look at rather than just having Wild West of parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Budge. Republican challenger Larry Clausen. The change to privatizing residential parking has not worked out so well. What are your thoughts regarding the residential and so-called city lots that have been subcontracted out? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
In terms of private lots, I think I encourage, personally my view is that we should encourage private lots, and if we need to somehow regulate that in some way, and I hate to use the word, perhaps that's appropriate. I know that we disallow them using what you call the booths on cars. There's a natural resistance in our city to enforce parking to begin with. So even if it's on your own property, I guess that came through. But if it's their private property and they want to rent parking spaces, I don't see why the city in any way should interfere. As far as the SP Plus contract, they've been here for 2 years. Does anybody feel like parking is improved?
Yeah. Yes.
You do?
Yes.
That's very good. Anybody else? It's like changing the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're going to adjust the fine over here. We're going to put meters over here. We're going to allow 3 hours over here and 2 hours over here. None of that solves the fundamental problem that we want to have a pedestrian community. The stores want it. That's what they really want. They want people to move about, whether it's their employees or whether it's their customers. And they're divided over which they want to be able to park, to be close. But the point is that we need to solve the transportation problem within our city, within the downtown area, so that people don't think twice about coming downtown. And they know that they're not going to have to wait more than a couple minutes to step on a small van and go wherever they want if they don't feel like walking a longer distance. We need to have a vision, not fix a parking problem that we've had for years and years.
The next question, audience generated, will begin with Alderman Joe Budge. What will you do to improve Spa Creek Trail to connect our neighborhoods and create a safer city for pedestrians and bicyclists? Alderman Joe Budge.
I think the issues with pedestrians and bicyclists go way beyond just the Spa Creek Trail. The Spa Creek Trail we, of course, need to work on. There's a trail that goes from, there's a march trail that goes from Truxton Park around through the Truxton Heights area and comes out back by Bates and Middle School. We need to connect that up with through the neighborhoods into the city, into downtown, so that you can get from here to there without being in danger from cars and have a reasonable prospect of getting where you want to go. In the trail itself, where it's laid out, we need to improve the lighting and the safety along the trail so that it ceases to become a haven for midnight drug deals or people running from the police. Nothing like shining a little bit of light on the problems and marking out bike lanes within Truxton within Truxton Heights to allow for the bikes there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Joe Budge. Republican challenger Larry Clausen. What will you do to improve Spa Creek Trail to connect our neighborhoods and create a safer city for pedestrians and bicyclists?
Well, my principal concern is crime and public safety. And I don't know that there's an immediate solution to that without we have other areas like that in the city where public safety is a big issue, and people are not safe as pedestrians or joggers or bicyclists. So I guess it's a public safety issue for me first, not a question so much of improving the trails.
Thank you. Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. What will you do to improve Spa Creek Trail to connect our neighborhoods and create a safer city for pedestrians and bicyclists? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well, first, let me say that I believe that a livable city has to have quality bicycle and pedestrian facilities and a large number of bicyclists and pedestrians. And presently, we're very disconnected. The paths that you speak of, stop and start and stop and start. I can't say that I'm, I would ride my bicycle more if it were safer and it was more connectivity. This has to happen at the city council level. We have to decide if we want a bicycle-friendly and a walkable-friendly city. It sounds pretty simple, but it's a whole mind shift. Instead of having signs directing vehicles to City Dock or whatever, let's start having signs that say a 0.8 mile walk to the water. just get people to start walking and realize that basically everything is within a 1 mile radius. Specific to the bicycles, I know that my friend Alex Pine has been an enormous advocate for bicycle riding, and he has worked with the county because this does involve the county, and there have been some signs of progress. I don't know if you've been to City Dock, but it's so exciting to see a bike rack down there that's full. I'm an advocate of bike share programs. I know that there's positives and negatives. But could you imagine having a bike share outside of garages where people could pedal down to the water? These are the things, again, that we have to decide on the council, the vision forward, or else it's not going to happen.
Our final question of the evening, randomly selected from the audience submitted questions, will begin with Republican challenger Larry Clausen. What uniquely qualifies you to be alderman? Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
I would say the fact that I have broad experience in both public service, in the intelligence community, and in private business. So I would say my business and my parallel avocation of art is one consideration. But the other, perhaps the most important consideration, is my connection with the community, which I think is very strong, and I think I'm well known and trusted in the community. And I have no problem. In fact, I want to find out what the community thinks. And this would be something new in Ward 1. By the community, I don't mean just certain businesses or certain high contributors. I'm talking about residents, a term you rarely hear. So I feel connected with the community, and I believe that I know how to bring people together. I think that's been demonstrated throughout my career, and certainly in my few years here in Annapolis. Those are the two important things I think that I bring to the table.
Thank you, Republican challenger Larry Clausen. Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. What uniquely qualifies you to be an alderman? Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney.
Well,
Is that my own? I spoke of some of this in my opening statement, but let me just reiterate. I have a civil engineering degree, and in the course of doing that, I chose, I was ahead of the curve in taking sustainable built environment courses, urban design, historic preservation, and then I chose to work for a construction management company. And I bring those up because I am an avid reader of sustainable design. Jane Jacobs, if anyone knows her, livable streets and sidewalks. It's my passion, and I want to bring that into this job. I know that I can. The stars almost aligned in me being here at the right time. I remember I took a grad course and we went to Annapolis and looked at the Hollander Wall to see if it would be recoverable. I never knew I'd be back here 15 whatever years later asking to have your vote. As far as my experience in my career, again, I spoke of having that programmatic effort, collaborative effort, bringing people together. I know that I demonstrated that on multiple occasions being Ward 1 president. I love this community. It's hard to run against these gentlemen that are so well respected in the neighborhood. It is very hard. This was a tough decision for me to make. But I know, with due respect, that I'll do a good job. And in closing, I ask you for your support and your vote, and together we will implement our vision for Ward 1.
Thank you, Democratic challenger Ellie Tierney. Incumbent Alderman Joe Budge, what uniquely qualifies you to be alderman?
Thank you. I think I touched earlier in my opening remarks on my experience on the council and my ability to achieve practical results for our community. My background includes in a business school, environmental sciences, and a lot of work in software development. In development, I was in charge of project teams bringing together disparate groups with disparate interests, figuring out how to get them all to work together to design products for the consumer market, and quite successfully. These are some of the same skills that you use working on legislative solutions. Also working in large organizations, I developed the skills to work in a bureaucratic organization and get results. These skills are directly translatable into working with City Hall and achieving results for my constituents. I think that a combination of my experience, my work in bringing people together, my understanding of finance, gives me a good leg up on understanding what needs to be done on the City Council and in the City government. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Joe. That concludes the question portion of our evening. We will now have a final chance for each candidate to give a 1-minute closing statement. We will work backwards from where we started with the opening. And so the first person to give the 1-minute closing statement will be Republican challenger Larry Clausen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you again for being here and the hospitality of the Inner West Street Association and Metropolitan. Jody, thank you. I love this community. I'm connected throughout it in many ways. And I want to be your alderman for no other reason that it's an opportunity to serve and make use of what I've learned over the last 3.5 years about the problems, the fundamental problems that we have in the city, and realizing that these problems can actually be solved. They do not require lots of studies. They don't require lots of minutiae. What they require is vision and the political will of the City Council. And it'd be my privilege to provide that kind of leadership on the City Council and to you as constituents to make sure that you're fully informed and to make sure that I'm fully informed about your views, and I ask for your vote. Thank you so much.
Alderman Joe Budge.
Thank you, Joe. My campaign is based on 3 elements: community, experience, and balance. The Ward 1 is an interesting and fascinating tapestry of different communities. Part of the job of alderman is to make sure that every voice in all of the communities is heard and represented down at City Hall. That's part of the reason why I supported the Equal Protection Act, and something I will continue to strive towards making sure we implement. I've described my experience already, and then in balance, the city government doesn't run on extremes. We have different points of view on the council, different points of view in our community, and we need to, as we bring these voices together, we need to find out and find ways to bring balance to the conversations and give everyone a chance to have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you. And I forgot to say my thanks in the beginning to Metropolitan and all for having this and hosting this. As you know, or some of you may know, I'm a small business owner. I own a modest fort. My husband and I own a small bed and breakfast in historic Annapolis. And I tell you, I see Annapolis through the eyes of our guests. And there guests that are alumni of the Academy. They're visiting, they're repeat guests, and it breaks my heart when they tell me what they don't like to see. It might be the empty storefronts, it might be the ruins, the charred ruins of the yacht club, or it might be the Chipotle on Market. And there, by all means, there are some good things. My guests last night had a great time at Dining Under the Stars. Thank you, somebody, for giving them a seat. But my point is, I believe that the status of Annapolis Ward 1 right now, to me at least, is unacceptable, and we can do more. And I want your vote, and if I am successful, I'd like to meet with you all once a week at a place to be determined, to chat this all out and see how we can make this a better place to live and grow family. Thank you.
Thank you, Democrat. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Ward 1 Alderman debate, brought to you by the Inner-West Street Association. Please don't forget to vote in the primaries on September 19th and in the general election in November. Thank you.
This has been the Maryland Crabs podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.